Hello everyone, welcome back. This is Tuplex. In today's tutorial we're going to be covering trains. Now if you haven't already, please check out tutorial number 17. In that one I set up this very simple train which brings oil to the base. This is the This is the simplest type of train layout where we have one train on a single piece of track. It's the only train, and it only goes back and forth between two stations. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to assume that you already know how that works and how to set that up. So if you're not sure how to do that yet, please check out video number 17 in my tutorial series. If you're already pretty comfortable with that, then we'll go on to the next topic. So after we set up a point-to-point train, the next level of complexity would be to have a train that goes to multiple stations. So in this case, I've set up 3 hypothetical train stations, A, B, and C. And right now, this train just goes back and forth between A and B. And I just set it to wait for 1 second at each stop and continue to go on its way. All right, so let's say we wanted it to alternate between A and B and A and C. How could we do that? Well, what we would do is we would first select B and then click on Add Station. And in this case, we want it to go back to A. And again, we'll do 1 second of inactivity. And then after it goes back to A, we want it to go to C. And again, I'll do 1 second of inactivity just for the sake of demonstration. All right, so in this case, once it gets to the last station, it'll cycle back to the first one. So you only need to do 1 sequence. And in this case, we can see now that the train is going back and forth. And because there is only 1 train on this rail system, we don't need to put any signals here. It's got a clear track all the way to the station in each case, and it can make the turns without having any signals at all. So if you have a rail system, no matter how complex it is, if you only have 1 train running on it, you really don't need to place any signals at all. Okay. Now, where you would need to start to put some signals is when you get more than 1 train. So let's say, for example, that we want to put another train here. So I'll go ahead and add that. And I'm gonna, right, see, so here we've got a collision. That's bad. All right, let's pick this up. All right, so obviously now, if we're gonna have multiple trains, we need to put some signals in place so that we can prevent those collisions. So the first thing you should know is that the game separates the track segments into what it refers to as blocks. So right now, all of this rail is 1 block. When you start to place signals, each signal will create a new block. And you can see this if you go to the debug menu. First of all, let me stop this guy. If you go to the debug menu by hitting F4 and show rail, here we go, show rail blocks. All right, so we can see that this whole area of track is all got these purple indicators. That means it's all the same block. And we can see down here too, this whole rail is all the same block. Now, if I take a rail signal and I place it down here, now we can immediately see that this is now split up into 2 blocks. And so what the signal does is it will tell, and in this case we put a signal on both sides because it's a 2-directional track here. The signal always goes on the right side of the direction of travel. And you can see that, if I turn this off for a second, you can see that by those yellow arrows on the screen. So when I select the right side track going west to east, and the right side going east to west is up here on top. And now that we put those signals down, we can see that the signal for west to east is green, and that's because the block ahead of this signal is clear. Okay, so this block here is clear. The block going from east to west, however, is red, or the signal is red, because the block ahead of this is not clear. There is a train there, and that's why this is red. So what if I had a train? First of all, let me relocate these signals a little bit. I want to get them closer to this junction. Okay. So what if I have another train and I want to be able, if I have a train in this station here, what if I want a train to be able to travel to this station, which is clear? Well, in order to do that, I just need to create more blocks. So what I could do in that case is I could come over here and I could put 2 more signals. Okay. And then we put signals here as well. Actually, for this example, I wouldn't even need those. Okay, so now in this case, you can see that the signal from east to west is green because there is a clear block. Now in this case, the block is this section of track and this section of track, right? So let's try this now. First of all, I'm going to turn off the block indicator, and I'm not going to use that anymore. Okay, so let's put in a train. I'll give it a little bit of fuel. All right, now let's say that I want this one just to go back and forth from A to B. So let's go to A, 1 second of inactivity, and then B, 1 second of inactivity, and then in this case, we'll have this one only go between A and C. Okay, so let's switch it on automatic. It can start to do its thing, and let's switch this one on automatic so it can do its thing. Now let's see what happens. Okay, well, now we got another problem. This train entered the junction because the junction was clear, and now we have a traffic jam. So let's send this one back to C and figure out how we can fix that. Right, and now this one won't get a green signal at all because this whole block is full until now. So we're going to continue to get blocks. So one thing we can do to improve this situation is to add more signals. So now if we look at the blocks, we can see that this junction is its own block, and then each station has its own block that it belongs to. So let's send this back to C, and let's watch what happens. All right, and we should be able to avoid, well, we can avoid collisions, but we still can't avoid a traffic jam because now we're set up to where we are allowing the trains to block the junction. Okay, and we don't want that. So let me put that on manual. Let's send this back to B and put that on manual so it stops. All right, so this is where chain signals come into play. What a chain signal will do is it simply repeats the signal ahead of it. So in this case, I have a red signal here. Okay, so if this train wants to go from B to A, it will leave the station because this first signal is green, because this block in front of it is clear. It'll go into the junction, and then it gets to the red signal, so it stops and it blocks the junction, and we get a traffic jam, and none of our trains can go anywhere. Now, if we replace this signal instead with a chain signal, that will simply repeat the signal that it has in front of it. Okay, so this signal is red, the chain signal is repeating that red signal. Now in this case, this train will not be able to block the junction, and this one will be able to travel through. All right, and let's do the same thing down here. All right, now if we set both of these trains to automatic, they should both be able to go back and forth to their stations without blocking each other. Okay, see now this one on the bottom, it can't go because 2 blocks ahead is full. Now it has a green signal and it can go forward. Okay, so now we have a network that works with multiple trains, and the important element here is that we're using chain signals to prevent the junction from getting blocked by a train that's waiting for another train to clear. Okay, so let's ramp up the difficulty a little bit more here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a fourth station, and I suppose we'll call this one Station D. So let's just rename that to D, and we'll set up a similar set of signals as what we have there. Okay, I'm just gonna move these signals a little bit closer so that we have more room. Okay, and we can see that we immediately get another traffic jam. So let's send this back to C and shut it down. And we'll shut this one down as well. Okay, so now here's a scenario where maybe we have two trains that each have different destinations and origins, but they share a section of track, this one in the middle. So how would we set that up? Now in this case, instead of going back to A, I want it to go from C to D. Okay, so this one on top goes from A to B, and this one goes from C to D, and they both share this segment of track. Now, we would basically just repeat a similar type of a setup there. So let's go ahead and place these signals. Now in this case, this track is a little bit short. These white brackets that you see show the length of a train car or engine. So that helps placing signals in the right place. We need to make sure that we place the signal far enough away from the station that the train can get past the signal. All right, so in this case, we could put a pair of signals there, and we could put a pair of signals there. Okay, but now again, we need to make sure that we have chain signals so that we prevent this junction from getting blocked. And sometimes it can get confusing to try to figure out which signals need to be chains and which ones can be regular signals. So the rule of thumb that I follow is that the exit of a junction is always, the exit of a merge like this always gets regular signals. And where we enter into the junction, we use chain signals. So in this case, we would have a chain signal up here because this is where we enter the junction going from east to west. And then on this one down here, we would have the chain signal right there because that's where we enter this junction. Right, now, if the trains are splitting, and it depends on the direction, right? When trains are splitting, in other words, they're coming down this single track and they have a choice between the top or the bottom, they don't need chain signals because they're free to choose either one, and then once they get to the next signal, they'll stop or not. But where you have a merge, where two tracks come into one, which you have when you're traveling from east to west, that's where you need to use chain signals to prevent your intersection from getting blocked, or your junction from getting blocked. So let's go ahead and run these, and let's see if we can make this work without any problems. So far, so good. Okay. So now this way they're able to share that that single rail, that single section of track in the middle, without getting in each other's way, without blocking the intersections, because we have everything signaled properly. Now when it comes to signals, obviously in this example we're putting signals on both sides of the track. And that's because for a two-way track, which all of these are, you have to put signals on both sides. If you have a section of track that you want to be one-way only, then all you have to do is put a signal on one side. So in this case, this is a west to east track, and trains will not even attempt to go from east to west. So if you put a signal on only one side of a track, you turn that into a one-way track. So if you're trying to figure out why your trains aren't working, and you're using two-way rails, like we are in this example, make sure that you have signals on both sides of the track. Otherwise, you could run into problems. Okay, now another example of chain signals would be if we have, now in this case we have splits and merges, right? There are other track layouts where you might just have a crossing like this. Okay, so let's see what happens in the case that we do a crossing. So I'll put a couple more stations here. And we'll call these, let's see, A, B, C, D. I guess we should call these E and F. That'll be E. This will be F. Okay, and let's put down another train. Okay. Now immediately all my other trains have stopped. So see if you can figure out why. I'll give you a second to think about it, and then I'll give you the answer. Okay, so the reason that these trains stopped is that since this train, or this track touches this track, this section of track is now part of the same block as this piece of track. And we can see that if we go to the debug menu. Because these tracks are touching, and I don't have any other signals to create more blocks. So now this is all one block, and since I have a train sitting on that block, I've got red signals, and no other trains are going to be able to enter this block anywhere. So in order to get these two trains running again, I need to split this up so that this train is in a block that's not occupied by any other trains. Okay. So leaving that display on, let's go ahead and put some signals. Now again, if we follow our rule of thumb, where the exit, in this case, the exit of this junction is going north, the exit should have a regular signal, and the entrance should have a chain signal. All right, now things are going to start to flow again, because now this center block consists of this track and then just a small portion. There's no trains there, and it can go. This still won't work properly, though, because now this is a one-way track. And let's see what happens if we try to go from F to E. 1 second. Add E for 1 second. And go. Okay, so that's waiting. That's good. Then that train goes. Now that one can go. And now when it gets up there, it's not going to be able to come back. And you can see that you get an error there, no path. And the reason for that is because I only put signals on one side of the track. That turned this into a one-way track. It could travel that way, and it can't get back. All right. So we can fix that by putting more signals. And now it can come back the other way. Let me turn off this block display. And again, traveling from south to north, the entrance of this junction here has a chain signal and the exit has a regular signal. Coming from north to south, the exit now is on this side and the entrance is on that side. So if you follow that simple rule of thumb where you put a regular train signal on the exit of your junctions and put a chain signal on the entrance of your junctions, more times than not, you're going to have your signals set up correctly from the get-go. Now, this is, again, a fairly simple train setup where I have two-headed trains traveling in both directions on two-way tracks. There are obviously more advanced ways to do that, using dual tracks, for example, a very common one, and one that I did in my last series where I made a fairly large base. I had that set up with a two-rail system, and in that case, I had signals on one side only. So this track would go in this direction, this track would travel in that direction. Now, when you have a two-way system, you have to put loops so that when a train gets to the end, it can find a way to turn around, right? So you would have to do something like this to make this work. So that makes the rail networks much bigger, a little bit more complex, but you can definitely handle a lot more traffic when you have one-way rails everywhere, you know, just like a road. I mean, imagine if you had a road system in a city where every road was one lane and cars had to wait for other cars to come from the other direction. You know, the city would grind to a halt very quickly because anytime a piece of road is occupied, all the other cars have to wait. So when you have lanes or one-way roads where the cars can go one after another, they can all travel in the same direction at the same speed. Obviously, with that sort of a setup, you can get much more traffic going simultaneously. And so in the next episode, it'll be a fairly short video, but I'll show some examples of two-way rails and how you design intersections and set those up. So I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions, as always, please let me know in the comments, and I'll do what I can to answer those. Thanks again for watching. Have a great day. Bye.